My name is Jeremy Walton, and today we're gonna talk about cinematic filmmaking. Let's go! I know I need a haircut and a shave. I'll get around to it. Or maybe I won't, who knows? Okay, I'm pretty pumped about this video, and I got a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. If you're a filmmaker, there's one topic you've seen on YouTube many times, and it starts with cinematic. And it's usually someone giving you tips on how to get cinematic footage, which is a good thing. But with so many videos on the topic with so many opinions, it can seem like everything is cinematic. For example, is this cinematic? Wait, I forgot those bars. Oh, don't forget the slow motion. Then slap on a cinematic grade with some music. Cinematic? You tell me. Now, I'm not knocking on these techniques. I'm a fan of slow motion and I definitely use it. I just wanted to do a recap and have a little fun. So before we dive into all of that, maybe we need to take a step back and actually define the word cinematic. If we do a quick Google search for a cinematic definition, we see it's having qualities, characteristics of motion pictures. That really doesn't narrow it down. I do love what it says below though, the cinematic feel of their video. That's a little more interesting, and I will come back to that. Basically, there really isn't a clear-cut definition we can look at, but like I mentioned, there's plenty of videos on how to get cinematic footage covering a wide variety of techniques. What I want to do in this video is examine 3 techniques I see people use to get cinematic footage, or at least what you'll find if you do a search on YouTube, and examine how well it really helps you achieve the look you want to get. First up on the list is shallow depth of field. That's probably no surprise, and what you'll see are plenty of people talking about the need of an ND filter to get a cinematic look. If you're new to filmmaking or a seasoned pro, I suggest getting an ND filter, but that's like saying get batteries for your camera. What people are usually referring to is using a shallow depth of field, and in most cases you'll need an ND filter to get proper exposure. I'm actually a fan of a shallow depth of field. When I'm here in my office, I'm shooting at an f2.8. When I'm shooting in my car, I'm also at a 2.8 using an ND filter. Check out my video, How I Vlog in My Car, to see my entire setup. Back when DSLRs started shooting video, there was an explosion of people using a shallow depth of field. We see it in cinema, but now these tools are in the hands of the masses and really got overused. The one question still needs to be answered though. Does using a shallow depth of field make your footage cinematic? Speaking of cinema, I want to look at the film The Revenant by Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. It won 3 Academy Awards, including Best Cinematography. The opening scene just launches us right into this world, and what don't you see? Exactly, a shallow depth of field. We have the opposite, deep focus. Throughout the film, Alejandro utilizes wide-angle lenses to explore this world, and it makes sense. We want to see the environment, we want to see the mountains, and especially what's happening all around us. Now, there are times we can see a shallow depth of field. I'm not saying it's absent, it's just not always needed to tell a cinematic story. I do want to look at one more example under this topic. The film The Favorite, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos and nominated for an Academy Award for Best Cinematography. This was another film that utilized a wide-angle lens. We're talking about a 6mm fisheye. You could see so much of the castle in a single frame that you wouldn't get if you were shooting on a longer lens with a shallow depth of field. And even though a fisheye probably isn't on your list for cinematic, it works for this film. So with these 2 examples, and I'm sure there's plenty more, we can see the opposite to be true. These cinematic films are getting cinematic results at the highest level in a way that doesn't go hand in hand with cinematic. Number 2 on my list is going to be aspect ratio. I know you've seen those black bars. It gets used a lot. Some people love it, some people hate it. But does it truly give you cinematic footage? That's the question. When it comes to aspect ratios, it can get confusing. So let's look at the most popular. We all know 16:9 or 1:7:8. We have the old school 4:3 or 1:3:3, and then the 2 commonly known ratios in cinema are 1:8:5 or 2:3:9, sometimes referred to as 2:4:0. What you see on YouTube is people trying to mimic the 2:3:9 aspect ratio. 1:8:5 is pretty close to 16:9, so people go with a more extreme look, usually associated with anamorphic, but without the characteristics of anamorphic lenses. There's a lot of reasons why people choose one over the other, but if we're talking about what makes something cinematic, Let's look at a couple examples. Wes Anderson, who directed the film The Grand Budapest Hotel, among many others, has a very recognizable style. In The Grand Budapest Hotel, 3 aspect ratios were used during different time periods: 4:3 for the 1930s, 2:39 for the 1960s, and 1:85 for the 1980s. Compared to what people are doing to mimic a cinematic ratio like 2:39, this would be the complete opposite, but doesn't make the film any less cinematic. The most recent film I watched in the theater was The Joker, directed by Todd Phillips. Right off the bat, I think most people would characterize this film as cinematic. It has a lot of the traits people usually mention when referring to cinematic. But what aspect ratio did they use? 1:85. Like I mentioned, that's almost a 16:9 aspect ratio. That's what you're watching right now. Do you have to uncheck that cinematic box because of it? I don't think so. If you watched the film, did you even notice it? Why do we automatically think something is cinematic because we slap on some bars? I have an idea, but for now, let's move on. What I'm going to talk about for number 3 is all about the grade. One comment or question I get, or have seen countless times, is what LUT did you use, or how did you grade your footage? How many YouTube videos use the title Cinematic Color Grade? What is that exactly? A popular method is the teal and orange look. That's used a lot. It has its place, but thinking if you copy this look, you'll automatically get cinematic footage is not the best approach. To give you an example, I want to rewind back to 1993 and take a look at Steven Spielberg's film Schindler's List. This Academy Award-winning film was in black and white and won Best Cinematography. Spielberg said, "The Holocaust was life without light. For me, the symbol of life is color. That's why a film about the Holocaust has to be in black and white." The film didn't use any modern filmmaking tools as well, like cranes, steadicams, or zoom lenses. All creative choices that help them tell their story in a cinematic way. Flash forward, and 2019 had Roma, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, another black and white film that took home the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. It was actually shot in color, then made black and white in post. He said, "I wanted a digital black and white that would embrace digital, not try to hide the digital quality of it." Now, don't start grading everything in black and white. Seriously. These are just a couple examples of how something specific that people refer to as cinematic, like a LUT or teal and orange, don't always apply and don't necessarily give you the results you're looking for. Even in black and white, both these films used it for different reasons with cinematic results. Now I'm going to flip black and white back to color in a unique way and talk about Steven Soderbergh's film Traffic. That year he was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, one for Traffic and one for Erin Brockovich. He was competing against himself. Not a bad situation to be in. There were 3 distinct looks for Traffic that followed 3 different storylines. The Drug Czar storyline had a dominating blue hue with blacks that pulled the rest of the color palette out of the scene with hot or blown out highlights. Mexico had a gritty, contrasty look that felt hot and full of grain. And for the third storyline, really saturated and bright primary colors were used that just popped off the screen. Again, we can see in these examples, it was a choice the filmmakers made to tell their story. Some using similar techniques for different reasons, some using unconventional approaches, but in the end, all cinematic in their own way. I know I brought up a lot in this video, and you might be thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? I want to refer back to that definition we looked up, the cinematic feel of their video. Feel being a key word. When it comes to depth of field, aspect ratio, or the grade or look of a film, people are trying to capture a feeling. For some people, that's a 2:39 aspect ratio. When they see it, it gives them the feeling of cinematic. Maybe a specific color grade for someone gives them the same feeling. The differences I see from these films and videos you watch on YouTube is the filmmakers made choices based on what would serve the story or best way to tell that story. People then watch those movies and get a sense of cinematic storytelling. Then they pick out details from those movies, for example, aspect ratio, and apply it to their footage. Now, I'm not saying that's inherently wrong. I get influenced by movies all the time, but as a filmmaker, I think it's important to understand the difference. The word cinematic can mean so much and vary from person to person. I want you to not follow, but explore how people have used it. Enjoy the process. Find ways to discover what you like and what cinematic means to you. Then just go out there and do it. A good resource is the YouTube channel Cooke Optics TV. You should be watching that channel in general, but I'll put a link in the description to one video in particular. Here's a clip of when they asked cinematographers what makes a cinematic image.
I don't know. You know what? I've never knew that. I read it all the time on a commercial pitch, and they say we wanted to make it look cinematic. And I wanted to ask the same question. I don't know. There isn't any answer.
For real though, check it out. There's a lot more we can talk about. Maybe this will become a series. But I think these 3 examples are easily relatable if you watch filmmaking YouTube videos. And I do want to stress, I'm not saying something is right or wrong. I made this video to open up a discussion, and that's what filmmakers should be doing. Well, there you have it, 3 techniques I see people use to get cinematic footage. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more in the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. But until then, comment below and let me know what you think, what you see, and what you use to get cinematic footage. And as for this episode, it's a wrap.